Hi guys, Amy Wallace here. Today I am looking at Cooks & Gold's Menzerna polishing compounds. I have to admit that normally I am a bit of a traditionalist, and I've been using Tripoli and Rouge since, well, pretty much since I left college actually. Embarrassingly, I haven't moved on. I've tried Luxie. I've got to admit I'm seduced by the idea that it's not got so much silicone and nasties in it, and that, you know, it's supposedly better for kind of getting off your hands and everything. I think it's water soluble. I don't really know all the facts there, but I found it very difficult to get a finish because I tend to use a pendant motor for most of my finishing, and I just don't think I get the speed up enough. I think if you get the speed up enough, you're going to get a good finish. So anyway, this is the compound, as you can see, that I've been using, and it's pretty well loved. But what I have done, since Cookson sent me a rather lovely selection of Menzerna polishing compound, is to give these guys a whirl, and so far I'm pretty impressed actually. I've heard really good things about Menzerna. A lot of people rave about how good it is, and actually in the finishing industries it's pretty much one of the highest rated compounds. They use it a lot in precision engineering and sort of industries that, you know, require a really fine finish. It's made in Germany, so, as you know, German engineering is always good. It's pretty high quality stuff, highly graded, and you do get the finish that you pay for basically. And I have been playing around with all the different grades. As you can see here, I think I'll try and explain sort of how they work, because it's quite baffling when you've got this many compounds to choose from to know sort of which compounds to choose and how many to go for. Traditionally we're used to using Tripoli and Rouge, and it's a two-stage process. So Tripoli you're using first to cut back, to remove lines, scratches, you know, to prepare the metal for polishing, so you're getting it nice and flat, and then you're using Rouge as your final buffing compound to get it up to that final shine. In other industries they tend to use maybe a 2, sometimes a 3-stage process. So you can start off with a heavy cutting compound and then move on to a sort of medium cut, which starts to sort of get you a really nice shine, and then you finish off with a really fine finishing compound. And that works really well for a lot of people, particularly polishing aluminium and soft metals. But in jewellery we don't tend to do that. I don't know whether other people do, maybe they do, but as far as I've sort of come across, most people just use a 2-stage process. But with Menzerna you've got quite a few different grades here. So the one that you would start out with is this heavy cutting compound, the 456G. As you can see, it's a black compound. Now normally it normally means that you would polish steel and hard metals with it. In sort of compound terms, there's certain colours do certain things. It does vary depending on the brand. But this is good for all precious metals as well as steel. It covers pretty much everything, but it's got a great cut. If you look actually on the Cookson's website and you look at each of the products, it will tell you the cut grading and also the colour grading, or the sort of gloss grading. So the heaviest cutting ones will have, you know, a high number, sort of 7, 8, 9, and the gloss will be quite low, so sort of 2, 3. So this one, they've got a little handy scale of 1 to 5. This is a number 2, so I assume there's another one that would go a bit coarser. But for jewellery, certainly this is kind of cutting enough. And then you move on to the P164, which is a nice blue colour. They describe this as a general purpose compound, so I guess if you wanted something that's going to be, you know, pretty good sort of middling ground, this would be the one to go for. So that's number 3. Number 4 is the P275, and that is kind of a buttery yellow colour. I've got to admit, That one is still kind of in the middle. So if you wanted like a 3-stage process, I guess one of these two would be a good compound to go for, but it is a little bit finer again, so you would use that when you've got pretty good finish anyway. The P175 is a really nice kind of banana yellow colour. That is a super finishing bar, so it's at number 5, as is the M5, which is white. Now both of those are really good super finishing bar, and I can definitely vouch for that. The finish that you get with them is pretty good, but it's only ever as good as that initial stage, so you really have to focus on your cutting stage. Make sure you get a really perfect finish before you start polishing, otherwise no good. You're not going to end up with anything any better. You'll see scratches, you'll see marks, there'll be the shiniest scratch or shiniest mark in the world, there'll still be a scratch. So it's definitely worth spending the time, and actually if you can get a middle compound, you're improving everything all the time before you start going on to your really high finishing bar. And they've also sent me one of these really interesting polishing cream tubes. Now this one, it says that it's useful for stainless steel, aluminium, chrome, brass, copper, plastics, and so basically everything. So I would probably, if I was doing something like metal stamping, doing like aluminium kind of cuffs, bangles with stamping, you know, that sort of thing. I've got a little bit of aluminium here. I would use it just on a soft cloth for finishing those sorts of bits where you don't really want to get too hands-on with polishing. Let's have a little look actually and see what sort of effect we get with it. I haven't done anything to this bit of aluminium, so I don't know kind of what it will do. And I've got a soft cloth here, which is an old Town Talk polishing cloth. It's a nice fetching shade of pink, which is nice. And I'm just going to rub it on. And you can see, it's always a good sign with aluminium when you get a little bit black, because that means it's actually doing something, it's working. So yeah, you can really see it's actually, it's obviously got quite a lot of cut in it, and it's buffing it up. Be interested to see what would happen if you prepared the metal a bit better beforehand, because I've kind of just gone for a bit straight out of the packet. It's not got the best finish in the world, but then use a clean bit to start removing it. You can see actually it is really brightening up that top bit. So I think essentially it's a little bit like using Brasso, Silvo, those kind of things. I think it's actually a lot finer than that though, so you probably would want to use that once you've maybe gone through your polishing papers. A lot of people use those really sort of pastely coloured papers or emery paper first, but you can see, like, just from a few minutes just buffing away by hand, you can get a really nice bright finish. I'm quite impressed with that actually, without doing too much with it. And I would say that maybe if you're working with Fimo or other kind of like resin, potentially that would be a good compound to use by hand. You could probably use it with a rotary tool as well, like pendant motor, and I suspect that would give you a much better finish actually. But quite impressed with that. I think I might start polishing random bits of aluminium and all sorts. So I have to say that the two compounds that I find work really well for most jewellers, so people working in gold and silver, I find that the 456G is a really good cutting compound, and I like using the P175 afterwards. Those two together I find give a really good finish. I finished up some cufflinks the other day, gold 9 carat gold cufflinks, and sent them off for engraving, so they've got to have a really beautiful sort of flat finish. They were great. I was really pleased with the finish that we managed to get on them. So I'm converted. I think I'm going to throw away my rouge and my Tripoli. I think that's it. And the other beautiful thing about them is that menzerna actually is it's a very clean compound. So when you finish polishing, you'll still have black fingers. You'll get all the classic jewellers kind of adamant style, facial makeup, but it's a lot easier to get off. It's a really, really nice compound just to hot water so everything comes off, which is really good. To be fair, like I think my hands are quite warm to making jewellery, so you still do get a little bit of black ingrained, but they're a lot cleaner to use than traditional rouge, so that's really good. The other thing to mention, actually, we'll show you how it works and show you some of my little tips, is that with compound you tend to choose whether you want a dry compound or a kind of waxy compound. So all of these, I don't know whether you can see, have a little scale here that is, it's between dry and then fat. So a lot of these are actually sort of in the middle. So these two are 2 bars out of 3. This heavy cut one and this 2 finishing ones are very dry. That tends to be down to personal preference. A lot of people want to go for something that's maybe waxier. I think that's because it stays on the mop a little bit easier. Dry compounds tend to be a bit more sort of powdery and they move around a bit more. I've got to admit, I think that I don't know if I'm experienced enough yet to decide whether I like dry or fatty, but I know which ones I like, and funny enough they're both dry, so I don't know if that says anything. Anyway, I have a very good tip for anyone using these compounds. When you get it, and you get it in its bag with its little Cooksan's code on there, I keep the little mops that I use with that compound in that bag with that compound. That is really, it's a good tip because you don't want to ever mix compounds on a mop. You want to keep everything really clean, particularly when you're using such a good compound. You don't want to ruin it by mixing up all of your polishing bits and mixing the compounds on all of the mops, because essentially you might as well just use a complete mixture and not go for something so good. So that is my top tip. And what I found works really well is a little bristle wheel. That is great for getting into detail. So I've got a little reticulated pendant here, so I would use it for that kind of thing where you want to get right into all the detail. And then I've also got a little mini stitch mop, which is quite a hard mop. You could equally use a hard calico mop, or you could use a felt wheel, felt bob. If you're using it on the polishing motor, I would probably use it with either, you could use a stitch mop, or you could use a sort of calico mop, a hardish calico mop. Those are the 2 that I would kind of recommend. Obviously on a polishing motor you always get a better finish than a pendant motor. You're going a bit faster, you can push into it a bit more. I just use my pendant motor because it means I can sit at the bench and crack on with the polishing. You do still get a good finish, it just can take a little bit longer, that's all. So just going to change my bob a minute, and I will pop in a little hair bristle wheel. Bit of an oxymoron, it's a bristle wheel. And I will load up a little bit of the compound. I definitely recommend, which I'm not doing right now, which is very naughty, always wear a mask and wear eye protection as well, which I will do. bit of compound under the contact lens is never good. So on we go, and I am going to just have a little go on this hammered ring because that's quite a nice textured. Use my foot pedal. Nice texture to show you. So I've actually probably got a little bit too much compound on here. As you can see, it goes black. So ideally you wouldn't use quite as much as that. In fact, I'm going to just wipe a little bit off. I think I got overexcited. That's much better. Working over all the areas to try and capture all the different little facets. You can already see, I hope you can see, it's starting to shine up really nicely there. And what I would do is I would actually go and I would use hot water and a bit of fairy liquid, and I would get rid of all of the residue on there, because if you leave it on there you're just basically mixing up your compounds and you'll end up with some of the abrasive scratching once you go up the grades. So that's looking nice and clean, even though I cheated. And then I would use, if I was doing a flat surface, I'd probably use something a bit harder. I would use my little stitch mop, or I would use a felt. It's just because I'm doing something that's textured that I would use something like a bristle wheel. And then what I would do is change to a little cotton yarn fluffer. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. These are available individually from Cooksands as well. These are my favourite little finishing mops, they're really good. And I would use the P175, which is that yellow one again. Just load a little bit on there. It's a nice new mop, so don't fluff everywhere. Just load a little bit on there whilst it's spinning. And then fluff up the nose. Hence why you need a nice mask. And you can start to see black everywhere. You can start to see that you're getting a really beautiful shine on that. I don't know whether my camera really picks up. This is the thing with polishing, is it's really tricky to pick up a really decent finish, but that's starting to look, you know, it's pretty good. I tend to find it difficult to capture a good finish, and I think that's the case with a lot of jewellers. I don't know why, but just photographing stuff that's shiny is really tricky. So I hope you can kind of tell that it's good stuff anyway. What I tend to do, another tip, is a lot of people use wet and dry paper. When I'm finishing and sort of preparing a bit of work for polishing, I tend to actually use micromesh. And I use these little 4-way flexi files a lot. I find that they give a nice finish to start before you start polishing. So it's quite a good tip if you're starting out and you just want something which is going to sort of speed up your your sort of pre-polishing stage. These are a really good idea, and I find that I can literally go from either the dark grey even sometimes, or the pink, and start polishing with that 456G. So it does cut down how much you have to sort of pre-finish everything, because with wet and dry you can actually go through quite a few grades. I'd probably normally start about 800 grit maybe, as the sort of final stage before I start polishing with that. But yeah, just a little tip. It's one of the products that you'll find on Cooksen's website, and you can also buy sheet as well, so it's a really good tip to sort of match the two, and it upgrades your polishing prowess. So I hope that was helpful, and yeah, I can highly recommend menzerna.